All right, so this article out of Fox Business goes into a story that we've been talking about for quite some time here, and I want to elaborate on this story to a great extent because obviously we're not getting the full story from the mainstream media. Fox Business, CNBC, CNN, CBC, CBS, whatever you want to talk about here, they're not giving us a full story. And so, as this article says from Fox Business, Trump to nominate Fed critic for board. Here's what to know. And as the article goes into, President Donald Trump on Friday said he would nominate former campaign economic advisor Stephen Moore a seat on the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors. Moore is a former Wall Street Journal editorial writer and visiting fellow at the Conservative Heritage Foundation who called in December 2018 for Fed Chairman Jerome Powell to resign. Trump offered Moore the position, but he must still clear the federal background check that potential nominees undergo before it can be formally announced, according to a senior administration official. Moore is a frequent critic of Powell, arguing as recently as last week that the Fed's interest rate hikes in 2018 restricted economic growth. And I wanted to mention something there. So the thing about the interest rate hikes is that we have been watching that happen for a while now. You go back to previous to the last recession, and you'll see they desperately tried to prop up interest rates because they're worried about going negative. And honestly, going negative is a very real possibility here. I think it's kind of inevitable. And the Fed knows that. And they're doing whatever they can to avoid going negative, but they know inevitability is that they will. So I guess they're trying to make the damage as little as possible. The problem is, you centralize an economy to death, and eventually that climax comes, and all fiat currencies eventually revert to their true value of zero. Always have, always will, going back to 1024 AD in China, as I say so often here at WHAM, and it's not going to be any different this time. So, I mean, this is a major issue that we're having here, is that we have these critics to the Federal Reserve, the critics, they just don't like how they're centrally planning the economy. It has nothing to do with the fact that they're centrally planning the economy. It's just that it's the way they're doing it. And this is really counterproductive in a debate because they're basically trying to choose what kind of cancer is best for everyone as people are enforced into this, legal tender law system where currency is printed out of thin air, fractional reserve lending, enforced usury. No one signs that contract. And then they end up paying off the interest on the debt with their taxes. So it's absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, going back to this article, and I quote, "These hikes caused a severe dollar shortage, a fall in commodity prices, and a rapid slowing of growth, accompanied by wild swings in the stock market," he wrote in the Wall Street Journal with co-author Louis Woodhill, an entrepreneur and angel investor. "The Fed's goal should be to avoid excessively loose or tight money by seeking stable commodity prices." Look, the Fed isn't going to stabilize anything more than for a few years at a time. Everything that they do, they prop up that system and they cause that system to come down that much harder in the future. This is just basic monetary principles that we've seen to be true for decades, hundreds of years, almost 1,000 years. Like I said, 1024 AD in China. How many times do we have to go over this before people realize, oh wait, maybe a competing currency system outside of the organized crime, government cartel enforced system maybe might be the best bet. Maybe individuals should decide with their demand what they like best, and stores and businesses will conform to that which is most popular among the populace because it benefits them personally without having to depend on a giant central bank to destroy the economy. And he talks about wild swings in the stock market. Yeah, that's a system that was ready to crash in the first place. That's a system that was overvalued, highly propped up, and the Federal Reserve $0 trading desk pumping a bunch of fake money into the stock market. Look, there's good stocks, but I mean, when 95% of the market is overvalued and complete garbage, what do people expect to happen? Eventually it gets propped up so much it cannot be propped up any further and it comes crashing down, and that's what we're seeing in places like, for example, with the housing market in Vancouver and Los Angeles and San Diego and Toronto. I mean, this is just the inevitability of a seriously bubbled market. But I'm going to go back to the article here as the article continues on. He wrote in a December 2018 commentary piece, however, that it is doubtful that Trump has the ability to fire Powell, instead calling on him to resign. And I quote, "If not this, at least Powell should hold an emergency meeting of the Federal Reserve Board and immediately cancel the rate hikes. Better yet, the Fed should announce ways to inject money into the dollar-starved economy," Moore said. Oh, great. So this claim that Trump is overhauling the Federal Reserve System and bringing it down, it's his form of centralization that he wants. That, again, presidents don't really have a say over the economy overall. It's usually it's dictated by the state, but the Federal Reserve does whatever it wants. And as Alan Greenspan said years ago on, I believe it was 60 Minutes, he answers to nobody. And it's true. That's a case that we see here. But to see these people that Trump is pushing forward, a lot of the people, the Trump supporters, will leave that out. They'll say, well, Trump is trying to overthrow the Federal Reserve. No. He is just trying to change the way it manipulates the currency, the way it manipulates the economy, the way it creates vast amounts of debt. Like this idea that potentially he could nominate Herman Cain to run the Fed, to be on the board of the Fed. It's nonsense. Again, it's just different ways, people arguing over ways to manipulate the economy and really screw individuals over. And as it continues, the Fed on Wednesday signaled it would hold off any additional rate hikes in 2019. Still, Moore argued the damage was done and growth hasn't resumed, adding that commodity prices remain 10% below the level prior to a rate hike in September 2018. Trump has also routinely criticized the Fed's decision to raise rates, telling Fox Business on Thursday that the policies have hindered U.S. economic growth. He tends to just say whatever the last smartest guy in the room says. That's the way it's been for many years with Trump. Sorry, guys. And I quote, "The world is slowing, but we're not slowing," he said. And frankly, if we didn't have somebody that would raise interest rates and do quantitative tightening, we would have been at over 4% instead of 3.1%. Moore has disputed warnings from the top economists that the U.S. economy is heading towards a recession, arguing that the last people investors or employers should be listening to are the professional pessimists. He's also been a strong advocate for Trump's trade negotiations with China and predicted that Wall Street will rally once the deal is made. Moore has broke with Trump on some areas, particularly on calls for a 25% tariff on auto imports. Mr. Trump's heart is in the right place. He wants to save the U.S. auto industry, and he wants to save American auto jobs. He wrote earlier this month, tariffs have also never saved a domestic industry from decline. So anyway, I think the bottom line I want to bring to people here is the fact that, look, we have a derivatives bubble worldwide that's multi-quadrillion dollars. It's absolutely crazy. And then on top of that, we have this massive battle of currencies worldwide where the U.S. world reserve currency is being swapped out of at a vast scale, all while China props itself up as the next world reserve currency, and India battles them out as well. And both China and India will surpass the United States in the coming years. And this is where it's like, well, which empire is going to win? I don't want any empire to win. I would prefer individuals to win as free individuals. But the fact of the matter is, this is an issue that's actually occurring right now, and we have to look at the fact that the U.S. dollar has to crash, and then China has to crash eventually too, and so does India. And it doesn't serve any of us well. Individuals are used as pawns to sacrifice for the king and the queen, and people depend, like the government and the banking system depends on the debt of the populace, the subservience of the populace, because of course people are subservient if they are in debt, heavily in debt. And as all these bubbles get propped up left and right, and people say, oh, it's a new bull market in 2019, because obviously they bounced up from incredibly bearish market in 2018. People are all excited suddenly again, and it's like, when are we going to learn? It's not going to end well. Like, look, like I said earlier, 5% of the stocks on the stock market might be great, amazing, really bullish going long term, but when 95% is bad, we've seen this from the dot-com bubble, we saw this recently in cryptocurrencies, when 95% of it's bad, it'll bring the rest of them down, and it'll take a while to recover, and then people will lose their shirts. And it's just something we need to spread that message around. We need to tell people that we need to decentralize, break free from that financial system, break free from the banking system, which does fractional reserve lending, and at the same time is pushing zero reserve policies as well in a lot of cases. We need to break free from that system. No matter where in the world you go, you have that same central banking system, Keynesian, quasi-Keynesian, because it's not even completely Keynesian. Even John Maynard Keynes was basically pushing for gold overall, and that's still not good, because then they print more IOUs and they have gold in the safes, and then they create vast amounts of debt, and then when there's a bank run, there's nothing to really take. Again, this is a massive fraud bestowed upon the populace and enforced on people, and the usury at the state level enforced on people via their taxation, the taxes, the theft, the extortion, is destroying so many lives, creating such insane amounts of poverty. And then at the same time, employment's doing great. No, the labor force participation rate is where they're hiding most of those numbers. And they're creating tons of government jobs in California. That'll prop up the economy a bit longer. It's not going to end well, and people need to understand this. And if they understand it, hopefully they can control their money, because if they can control their money, they can control themselves. They can control their own lives. But when their money is controlled by others, then they're controlled by others, and then they end up being shoved down a bottomless pit of debt, being forced to ask for a ladder up from the government and the banking system, pushing them into perfect servitude right where the government and the banking system wants them. So again, folks, we need to break free. We need to diversify. This is my opinion, not investment advice, but I'm looking at things like gold and silver. I'm looking at things like cryptocurrencies that are properly decentralized and fundamentally useful on the market, not the 95%, but the 5% that are good long-term, that are bullish long-term, that can serve a purpose long-term, and can really revolutionize the industry, and not just from a currency perspective, but from the blockchain perspective as infrastructure as well. Fundamentally useful infrastructure that can replace governments and banks. So again, thanks for watching, everyone, and until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
Like what you see here, OM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so heavily demonetized and censored by YouTube, as these guys come in and flag all of our content as hate speech. The shadow banning is getting really bad, guys. Also, check our Bitcoin address right here on the screen or in the description below. We really appreciate it. And of course, check us out at the Red Pill Expo 2019. Of course, the great G. Edward Griffin and so many other incredible speakers will be there. Our link for that is below as well. And we cannot forget Mike Maloney's goldsilver.com, which you can also find in the description. One of the greatest market and monetary historians out there. We really encourage everyone to check that out. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.